Ghislaine Maxwell just made a major filing in New York federal court. This comes on the same day that the New York Times published a bombshell report identifying where the surveillance cameras were inside Epstein's 7-story townhouse in Manhattan. Also, the New York Times published more letters to Jeffrey Epstein. These letters from Epstein's 63rd birthday, including a letter from Woody Allen referring to Epstein's house as Castle Dracula, where several young women would walk around the house and remind him of Castle Dracula, Count Dracula. So let me tell you what Ghislaine Maxwell's major filing was first, and I don't think the timing is coincidental, and it certainly, I believe, relates to her meeting with the Department of Justice. She wants the Department of Justice and the federal court not to release the grand jury transcripts from the criminal case against her. She's saying, I am still actively litigating my case. We have a petition before the United States Supreme Court. Do not release any grand jury material. I'll go through the filing so you can see it for yourself, but who else doesn't want the material released? It's Donald Trump. So if you think about the moves the Trump regime made, they claimed to the public that they would seek the release of grand jury testimony. Even though the public didn't want grand jury testimony, we want the Epstein files that the FBI and the DOJ can release tomorrow if they wanted to, today if they wanted to, the 300 gigabytes. But in Florida, where they filed one of their motions, because that's where one of the federal cases were, the precedent says under no circumstance can the grand jury testimony be released. That's from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals case law. Then you go to New York, which is under the Second Circuit Court of Appeals case law. There's a case called In Re Craig, where under certain circumstances, albeit exceptional circumstances, grand jury testimony could be released. But you have to find out if there are any individuals implicated in the case who are still alive and what their rights are vis-a-vis an appeal. Are there any appeals taking place? Because that would counter against releasing grand jury testimony. So to be clear, not only is the Trump regime not releasing the files, but I think part of the meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell that took place over 2 weeks ago with Trump's former criminal defense attorney, right before she was then moved to this minimum security facility in Southeast Texas called Camp Bryant, which is where like Elizabeth Holmes is. It's basically like a sleepaway camp with no security guards. Ghislaine Maxwell lodged her objection to the release of the grand jury testimony, and we'll see what the judge does, but that will favor in blocking even the grand jury testimony from being released in New York. So here's what Ghislaine Maxwell filed. Then I want to talk about the bombshell reports, what the MeidasTouch network unearthed. Let's tie this all together. So Ghislaine Maxwell says the following: Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is not. Whatever interest the public may have in Epstein, that interest cannot justify a broad intrusion into grand jury secrecy in a case where the defendant, Ghislaine, is alive, her legal options are viable, and her due process rights remain. When Epstein died, prosecutors from the Southern District of New York pivoted and made Maxwell the face of his crimes. She became the scapegoat and the only person the government could put on trial. She was convicted in a media firestorm of false reporting and mischaracterization of evidence. Now, with her case pending before the Supreme Court, the government seeks to unseal untested, hearsay-laden grand jury transcripts, which contain statements presented in secret and never challenged by the adversarial process. Maxwell has never been allowed to review those transcripts, even though the government did not oppose her recent request to do so. So for those reasons, she's saying do not release even the grand jury testimony, which again is like 1% of what's out there. That's not what we want. We want the FBI and DOJ files, which are not anything related to this grand jury testimony. But she says don't release that. So she's blocking that, with the Trump regime basically kind of tacitly supporting that. Now, the Department of Justice refuses to answer the question why she got moved to this minimum security facility, which is like a camp. It's like the place where all prisoners want to be. When she had to be given a waiver because she's a convicted sex trafficker, she's not allowed to be in this Texas minimum security facility, but they allowed her to be there because she's getting preferential treatment. And again, as I've said before, it's like the people said, release the files. And Trump was like, okay, I'll release the sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell. And we're like, no, that's not what we want at all. Why are you helping the sexual? Why is that helping? Well, it's helping Donald Trump cover up his dark past with Epstein. So now let's talk about the bombshells from New York Times today, because all of this, I think, is related, right? Similarly, you know, the House of Representatives, the MAGAs, they've indefinitely postponed Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition. So don't let them gaslight you and pretend that they're going to have her deposition this month. The head of the Oversight Committee, MAGA Republican James Comer, said that he will postpone it until after the Supreme Court makes a ruling. So we're talking about maybe October, November for her deposition, and then she may invoke her Fifth Amendments anyway, but this is delay, delay, delay. So this is the New York Times article, a look inside Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan lair. In his 7-story townhouse, the sex offender hosted the elite, displayed photos with presidents, and showcased a first edition of Lolita, according to previously unreported photos and letters. I mean, look how creepy it is. You have this mannequin of a bride on a rope hanging down from the ceiling. But here's where the surveillance footage is. And this is the type of stuff that the Department of Justice and FBI have in its possession. We want to see who was in there. Right? We want to see, was Trump in there? It doesn't matter who was there. Just show us the surveillance footage. We know at that lair called Castle Dracula by Woody Allen in a letter that was also published by the New York Times. There's photos of Donald Trump and Melania there with Jeffrey Epstein. So there's that. You know, also there was another bombshell report from the Daily Beast this morning. Epstein was still a member of Trump's Mar-a-Lago long after he was indicted. In a book called The Grifters Club, Trump, Mar-a-Lago, and the Selling of the Presidency, the Miami Herald journalists who contributed to the story, Sarah Blasky, Caitlin Ostroff, and Nicholas Nahamas and Jay Weaver reported the authors viewed a membership list showing that Epstein's account had been closed. The book reports that the membership log shows his account at the club was closed in October 2007. And that time frame does make some sense because in 2007, that's when a lot of the allegations started to come out about Epstein. And there was an article in the New York Post, which we reported about on the video I did yesterday, which talked about how a source at Mar-a-Lago said that Epstein used Mar-a-Lago to procure underage girls. And Epstein then said, I've been going to Mar-a-Lago still. I have not been banned from Mar-a-Lago. So Epstein put out that statement. And so it's possible sometime after that, Epstein and Trump's fallout really took place. But it really wasn't about the procuring of the underage girls because Epstein was doing that back in 2000. I mean, Epstein and Trump would host parties together at Mar-a-Lago where there'd be 30 girls or women of people of indeterminate age who would be there. Virginia Giuffre, who was sex trafficked by Epstein, worked at the spa when she was 16 years old or had just turned 17. She worked at the Mar-a-Lago spa and Trump had her wear little tight mini skirts and skin tight shirts. And Trump was aware that he took, or as Trump says, he stole Virginia Giuffre and other girls from me. Then Trump said he's a great guy in 2002. After Epstein allegedly stole the girls from Mar-a-Lago, Epstein was at the wedding of Trump and Melania a few years after that. So they were close until a real estate transaction blew up where Epstein showed Donald Trump this home in Palm Beach that Epstein was going to buy for $38 million. Trump then made an offer for $45 million. And then Trump flipped it 2 years later to a Russian oligarch. And then Epstein was threatening to sue Donald Trump because you just, you screwed me out of this deal and now you made a $40 million profit. And I think Epstein was rumbling and speculating. That seemed like a shady transaction where you buy something for $45 million and sell it 2 years later for literally twice the price and don't do anything. And then when Epstein was considering his legal options against Donald Trump, that's when an anonymous source told authorities what Epstein was up to. And Epstein always thought, could that have been Donald Trump who did that?
Let's be real. The hardest part about cooking meat, steaks, chicken, or fish, you're tethered to a hot stove or BBQ, sweating, constantly checking it, maybe even singeing your eyebrows. And then when you finally serve it, half is beef jerky, the other half is still mooing. Well, those days are gone. I got a Chef IQ Sense, and suddenly I am ready for the Food Network. Chef IQ Sense is a brilliantly simple cooking sensor that goes into whatever I'm making. It's like a meat thermometer, but wireless and way smarter. Here's how it works. I just enter what I'm cooking in the Chef IQ Sense app, steak, chicken, fish, whatever. Then I pick how I want it done, well done, medium, rare, and Chef IQ Sense continuously monitors and predicts exactly when it will be perfectly cooked. No more opening a hot oven or hovering over a BBQ. I'm free to kick back or hang with guests until my phone buzzes with the alert. Dinner's done just the way I like it. It's the world's smartest, simplest wireless cooking sensor, and the best part, they just announced a flash sale. 15% off for a limited time. Visit chefiq.com and use promo code Meidas. That's chefiq.com, promo code Meidas, M-E-I-D-A-S.
Let me show you some of the other footage that's been unearthed, and let's tie this all together. So the MeidasTouch network unearthed this footage from 2006. This was an event that Donald Trump was speaking at called the Learning Annex, where he calls a lady of an indeterminate age from the audience. She says she wants to work in a Trump plane. And then Trump tells a story about how he can't control himself around attractive 17 and 18-year-old girls. He's like an alcoholic, he says, and he just can't control himself. And even if you're inexperienced, if you're 17 or 18 years old and you're attractive, he will hire you, he says, and he can't help himself. Because he's like an alcoholic, he says, when it comes to the way he can't control himself with these girls. Here, play this clip.
My name is Juliet. I have a question. My question is, how many jets do you have and how would I apply to be flight attendants?
I think she's hired. Yeah, hired. Now, I have a case. It was very interesting. A beautiful girl who was 17 or 18 applied to be a waitress. She's so beautiful. She's like a world-class beauty, like the young lady who just asked the question about the actors. She's so beautiful. And my people came, she said, "But Mr. Trump, she has no experience. So you interviewed her anyway, because she was so good." And I said, "Let me ask you, do you have any experience?" She goes, "No, sir." I said, "When can you start?" You can work on my plane anytime. Yeah. See, now, she worked on my plane. That's like a death wish for me, right? That's like an alcoholic. I have many friends that are wonderful people. They're alcoholics. You put scotch in front of them. It's like, this would be my form of alcoholism. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Right, then finally, we had Julie Brown, renowned journalist from Miami Herald, on the MeidasTouch network, and she told us the following story about how a lawyer deposed Epstein's accountant, and she talked about how Epstein used his modeling agency as a front to procure girls for himself, to sex traffic, and that Epstein had said to her that he wanted to set up the agency the way Trump's modeling agency looked. So here's the renowned Miami Herald reporter we spoke to. Here, play this clip.
Right. Well, there was that came out as part of the discovery in one of the lawsuits. Brad Edwards, who represented a number of victims, deposed Epstein had a company, a modeling company, and Brad Edwards deposed the accountant who worked for that company, worked for Epstein's company, modeling company. And in that deposition, she provided a lot of detail about what he was doing. And it's clear that he was using that company, a modeling company, as a cover in part for the sex trafficking that he was doing, because she was describing exactly what they would do. They would send the younger girls down to Epstein's place in Palm Beach. And she just gave more detail than we had before, including the fact that when Epstein formed that company, he said to her, I want it to be set up just like Donald Trump's modeling agency. So what that
and
means,
that's in that record that she testified to that under oath.
right?
That Epstein said that he wanted to model his modeling company that he would invest in on Trump's.
Well, there you have it, folks. We're tying all the loose ends together here on the MeidasTouch Network. So hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million. And thank you for watching.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.